Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Good evening, Guam. Welcome to this edition of The Buzz. Exciting show tonight. We're talking about political status. I've got right next to me, of course, the University of Guam grad student, Sabu Kalingo, as well as Dr. John Rivera and Dr. Ron McNitch as well. Political status, gentlemen. How are you guys doing tonight?
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So our political status, based on the law, as it's written right now. Sabu, were you born and raised here?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so you're Gumanian.
Yes.
Okay, not a Chamorro, but
Yes.
but you're Gumanian, right?
Yes.
Okay, so as you read the current law, you're not eligible to vote, right?
Yes.
Yes. No.
Yes.
You're not eligible to vote. Okay.
No.
How does that make you feel? Again, as one who born and raised here. You know Guam is your home,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
Your parents may have migrated from another country, but you yourself, you've only known Guam to be your home, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so you would have my kids, okay? My kids as an example. My kids were not born and raised here. They come often.
Mm-hmm.
But because of their lineage, they'll be able to stand in line and vote. And they'll say, sorry, Sabu, but you can't vote. How's that make you feel?
To be honest, yes, I do feel a little bit bad because I've lived here my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
born and raised here. Ethnicity-wise, yes, I'm not Chamorro.
Mm-hmm.
My parents migrated here about 30, almost 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you mentioned, this is my home. But if somebody tells me that I'm not able to vote, deep down inside, of course, I feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, again, a man with no country, you know. I've lived here my whole life, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't vote.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of bad. So.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Rivera.
Oh, definitely. And you know, so you know, when we talk about this, it becomes a very sensitive issue because you know a lot of people are emotionally tied to this because of a lot of things. For example, Sabu here, who was born and raised, but doesn't have the right paperwork, and in some senses, you know, even on other fronts where we have. Family members or relatives who are going off to fight, you know, and defend the country, and then turn around and not be able to vote for president, for example, and in those cases, or anybody who prior to coming to live to Guam could vote, then you come here and all of a sudden magic happens and you snap your fingers and you're no longer as good as you were prior to coming, and so these discrepancies, you know, caused a lot of conflict with regard to this versus that, and this is why it's always been an issue, and it's always and why it will continue to be an issue until such time where we come to some consensus or get some resolution on it, because there's a lot of discrepancies. You know, we talk about the good things, but we also talk about the injustices that are created.
Yeah. Now, in that argument, as well, you know, the argument that will say, Sabu, we feel bad for you, but your parents' homeland, I think at one point they did decide their political status. They did vote, and we were the only place basically here, one amongst very few, who have yet to establish to vote for their political destiny, and their people haven't given the right to vote. Your ancestors were given the right to vote. So how about that argument, Doc?
Yeah, I don't want to sound negative, and I do believe this topic needs a lot of discussion. Our leaders, particularly in the legislature, need to discuss this and work out the details. There's a lot of Chamorro people, just like Sabu, who were born and raised here. They're not going to be eligible to vote under this pretzel definition they've created over who can vote and who can't vote, because their families were already U.S. citizens in 1950, so they can't vote. And those are Chamorro people, native Chamorro people. And so I don't know. I think that we have to have a lot of strong community discussion on this. And I think that there's ways to respect everybody. I think there's healthy ways to respect everyone and allow everyone to have a voice or whatever level and respect the rights of only a Chamorro-only group and their voice. And we've done plenty of polling on this. Even among Chamorro people, 2/3 of Chamorro people don't support the current, you know, exclusive voting system, and only about 1/3 of Chamorro people do support it. So it's not even supported among general Chamorro people on Guam. And so I think that having a healthy discussion is very important, and getting people to talk about these things, because I have to say, this current way that this current vote is proposed and the way this definition for who can vote is currently proposed is simply not healthy. There's better ways to do it.
Well, a couple of weeks back, the two of you appeared in my radio show, and we talked about, of course, the Imagine Guam, right? Imagine Guam, and we talk about visions and voting and things of that nature, and of course the political statuses. But how do we move forward then in looking at years down the line here, 50 years down the line? Now, do we proceed as a status quo, or do we proceed, we put an Imagine Guam based on a political status, based on a vote that we may have? You talk about some of the things that need to be changed. The governor already, in a sense, gave us a directive that he's envisioning a political status vote in 2 years. 2 years from now is 2017. Statute says that political status vote will be done in an election cycle, election year, which means other than this next year, 2018 will be the next vote, election cycle. So a directive does not trump the law that is written. So we need to get on the same page and say, do we amend the law to make it 2017, or make it 2017 as the governor had again put a directive out, or do we go with the law and say 2018? We need to get together and read from the same book. I mean, we're not in the same book at this point.
I have to be very blunt and kind of descriptive of how just creative politicians can be. If the governor wanted to hold a vote in 2 weeks on political status, and he turned to any number of groups here and said, I want to hold a vote, and he organized it, and he marshaled his available resources to do it, a governor can do that. A governor doesn't need the legislature to do anything in that regard. Now, whether the legislature will approve of it or the legislature will cry about it, that's one thing. Or whether anyone will respect it outside of Guam, that's another thing. But a governor has very deliberate powers in what we call a moral suasion arena, meaning just by his word and example can influence the opinions of a community, particularly on matters of consensus, and that's what leaders do. And so, you know, while the legislature says this or that, I hate to say it, but in this area, a governor who wants to could do other things that the legislature will be cut out of because they failed. That's the point. They failed to do their job.
Now, when we talk again in the statuses, that whether it's 2017 or whenever it may be, when we go to vote, there's statehood, there's free association, and independence. Now, how do we move forward then with that? We have to, don't we kind of have to look back and look at provisions that were points of contention at the time the people voted for Commonwealth? And wouldn't those provisions, again, those provisions will give us more autonomy in what we want? I mean, there'll be a provision, of course, I mean, independence is self-explanatory. Statehood will give you more autonomy as well. Free association will give you more autonomy. So in whatever it is that we choose, the points of contention before, of course, are the immigration issues, and of course the mutually consenting clause will be there. So how do we move forward with these three statuses, knowing that those provisions that were points of contention before will still be points of contention now, and we may want even more so right now? Doug?
And I think that's the question, is that are there still contentions, and do they still hold true today? That was all of this was done some time ago. Demographics has changed, populations has changed, diversity has changed, mix has changed. Also, our environment has changed with technology and how we deal with one another. So are those things still relevant and valid? And if they are, so be it. And then that's the choice. And then moving forward, once we decide, and I think that's the thing, is that there are options on the table, for better, for worse, and people have their opinions about what these mean. And so once we establish what they are, then the question is, what do we still want? And I think we need to figure out what we still want in context. And if we want more, then so be it as well. But we need to start somewhere, and we need to start with some platform. And right now there's three. One would be better than three, and a unified voice would be better than three. And whether or not other people will give as much credence to it as we will, the fact is we have a voice, and that voice is unified in what we're saying, and we're saying this is what we want. And so that's an important step in the process to proceed. And then once we do that, then
Absolutely. Exactly that point is to get people to talk and get a consensus and get the direction going and actually do something. The problem, in my view, I mean, by the way, here's something I want to be very clear about. If people don't like what I say, argue about it or just disagree, that's what this business is about. That's what the talk radio business is about. And that's what we call a healthy discourse amongst the citizenry. People should be able to talk about these things.